Margaret Lewis had spent nearly a decade working silently inside one of London's tallest corporate buildings. Every morning before sunrise, she took 2 buses from the outskirts of the city, tied her hair back, pulled on her uniform, and became invisible. To the executives on the upper floors, she was just part of the background, someone who erased fingerprints from glass walls and polished floors that reflected a power and money she would never touch. On one particular morning, Margaret was assigned to clean the executive board floor on the 46th level. The city looked distant from up there, gray and indifferent beneath the glass. As she wiped the base of a leather armchair near the CEO's private office, voices drifted through the slightly open door. She hadn't meant to listen, but the words stopped her breath. The man speaking was Richard Whitmore, the company's ruthless CEO, known across the UK financial world for his aggressive strategies and spotless image. His voice was low, confident, careless. He spoke about cutting costs, about efficiency, about numbers that needed to disappear from spreadsheets before an acquisition deal was finalized that very morning. He said 30% of the cleaning staff would be laid off by nightfall, not restructured, not relocated, fired. Margaret froze. Her cleaning cloth remained clenched in her gloved hand as his words continued. He said no one would notice, that cleaning staff were replaceable, that the investors didn't need to know. Once the deal was signed, it would be just another internal memo. No one important would care. The phrase echoed in her mind. No one important. Her heart raced as images of her coworkers flooded her thoughts. Women who skipped meals to pay rent. Mothers who worked double shifts so their children could stay in school. People who trusted the company's recent promise of job stability. All of it had been a lie. Margaret pressed herself behind the chair, her body shaking not just from fear, but from a deep, burning rage. She understood, in that moment, exactly how small they saw her. Invisible, disposable, silent. But she wasn't just thinking about herself. She thought of her daughter, Emily, 17 years old, studying late every night at their small kitchen table, dreaming of university. Margaret worked for that dream. Every aching muscle, every early morning, every humiliation, it was all for Emily's future. Losing this job would shatter everything. Yet staying silent would mean becoming complicit in their betrayal. It would mean teaching her daughter that survival was more important than standing up for what was right. The voices inside the office shifted tone. The meeting was ending. The acquisition team would arrive any minute. Margaret's chance was slipping away. Fear screamed at her to disappear, to finish cleaning, to survive. But another voice rose stronger, quieter, clearer. What kind of example would she leave for her daughter if she stayed silent? What would she tell Emily when their world fell apart? That she knew it was coming, but did nothing. At precisely 9:58 a.m., the executive doors opened. Lawyers, investors, and journalists entered the room. The atmosphere transformed instantly. Smiles appeared. Handshakes followed. The polished theater of corporate success began. At the center of it all sat Jonathan Hale, the lead investor representing one of Europe's most powerful holding groups. He was calm, observant, the man whose signature would seal the multi-million-pound deal. Margaret stood in the corner, unseen, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it would betray her. The contract was placed on the table. The pen hovered inches above the paper. That was the moment. The point of no return. Taking a deep breath, Margaret stepped forward. The sound of her shoes against the marble floor cut through the silence like thunder. Heads turned. Confusion spread across the room. Who was she? Why was she there? She didn't raise her voice. She didn't shout. She spoke clearly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She asked the investor if he was aware that the company planned to fire nearly a third of its lowest-paid workers, hours after promising them job security solely to make the company appear more profitable before the deal. The pen froze mid-air. Richard Whitmore's face drained of color. Journalists leaned forward instinctively, their professional curiosity overriding the shock. Security was called. Richard demanded she be removed, his voice cracking with fury and panic. But Jonathan Hale raised his hand. He wanted to hear more. Margaret's legs trembled, but she didn't stop. She explained what she had overheard. She spoke not with bitterness, but with quiet dignity. She spoke for people who had no seat at that table, people whose lives were being treated as rounding errors on a balance sheet. She was their voice. The room shifted. Jonathan reviewed the financial projections on his tablet. The numbers confirmed it. Cost optimizations, workforce reductions hidden behind neutral language. A heavy silence fell over the boardroom. Then Jonathan stood. He announced that his group would not proceed with the acquisition under those conditions. not without a legally binding clause guaranteeing job stability and transparency. Ethics, he said, were not negotiable. The deal was suspended. Richard Whitmore's career collapsed in real time. Cameras flashed. Headlines were born. The story wasn't about a failed merger. It was about the cleaner who stopped it. Margaret expected consequences, termination, humiliation. Instead, she was thanked. Weeks later, the company restructured, management changed, the jobs were protected. Margaret received an envelope, not a reward, but an opportunity, a funded education program, a new role as a liaison between staff and leadership, a chance to be seen. 1 year later, she walked through the same building, no longer invisible. She wasn't powerful in the way the executives were, but she was respected. Her presence mattered. And at home, Emily watched her mother differently now, not as someone who cleaned floors, but as someone who stood up when it mattered most. Because sometimes, the smallest, most overlooked voice in the room is the one that carries the greatest truth. Thank you for watching.